Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this edition of LinkedIn Live with Suresh GP. And I'm pretty excited to be with you. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all who have joined us from all part of the globe. So, we have a great session today about XLA and experience management. Now, before I get started, I want to welcome every one of you to be spending the next 60 minutes with us talking about the holistic XLA and experience management. So, today I have a esteemed guest to present to us about the changing world of XLA and experience management. So, Weston Morris is the global director for Unisys Digital Workplace Solutions, named by HDI as one of the top 25 thought leaders in IT service and customer experience for 2022. Weston is the creator of the Digital Workplace Deep Dive podcast and is a contributing host for XLA TV. He has more than 3 decades of experience in the industry. Weston has been awarded 3 patents for payment systems, automation technology. He is currently focused on how AI, automation, our merged reality play a role in improving the productivity and experience of today's digital workers. With no further ado, let me welcome Weston Morris to the session. Thank you so much, Weston, for joining us today. I hope you're doing well and staying safe.
Oh, very much so. And I tell you, I am super excited to participate in this live session today. Looking forward to the questions that we get from the audience and digging into XLAs.
Yeah, so if you've just logged in today, please put it on the chat window, on the comment sections, or where are you dialing from so we know all our viewers from where they are in. So put it on the comment section if you have just joined us from different parts, where have you logged in from? And we'll be happy to see you and talk and take your questions throughout the next 60 minutes. So quickly, Weston, to today's agenda that we would like to touch upon is the topic is the fireside chat on XLA and experience management. And you and I have been in several conversations around XLA and talking with a lot of clients. So we need to understand what's happening around in the overall scheme of things and find out what is in store. So let's look at the agenda part. We have introduction to XLA. So a little bit of background on what XLA is all about, because a lot of people who are going to dial in today are new to this topic of XLA. We're going to talk about some of the myths around XLA and experience management, how to measure digital employee experience, some practical use cases of implementing XLA. And Weston, we think you have loads of experience of implementing some of those with your clients. So we would really want to get your practical wisdom around how you went about doing it and also some of the lessons learned during that element. Then we'll talk a little bit about XLA certification, if there is anything for people to get them jump started, and then we will have our Q&A. So few viewers who are coming in from the thing. So I want to welcome Biprajit from Bangalore. Thanks for joining. We have Roman Pelzel from Germany dialing in. Welcome. We have Mithun Prabhu from Bangalore, India. Welcome. And there's another LinkedIn user says from India. So welcome. We also have Lisa Schwartz saying, hi all, happy Tuesday. Welcome. We have Chetan Vikas joining us from Bangalore as well, from India. Sai Vishwanath, greetings of the day. He's also joining from Chennai. Then we have Ashwini Rao joining us from Bangalore. Perfect. So keep the questions coming in and let's get started. So Weston, let's get started on what does XLA mean? I mean, in the erstwhile days, we used to measure service level agreements, and we know that we always have this analogy of watermelon syndrome, where everything looks green outside because we are able to meet the service level agreements, but the moment I open the watermelon, it's bleeding red. So what is XLA in a very plain layman term? Is it a hype curve, or is it something which is really taking some action from your own perspective?
Well, I think we'd also agree that there's a fair amount of hype that is going on around XLAs. But I mean, I firmly believe that XLA is a tool that we can use in our business to greatly improve the overall value of the company. So if it's done right, it can do some amazing things. If it's done badly, yeah, it'll just be one of another failed initiatives at a company that lands on the garbage pile. But I think in a nutshell, it's about measuring employee experience. So it's a little different from measuring customer experience. There's a lot of similar activities that go on in how you do that, but it is with a different focus. And I will say this, they are connected, and they should be connected. If we're measuring employee experience, we should be thinking about how it connects with customer experience. And I think in the very near future, we'll actually see measurements that are tied. You know, the data is connected, and we'll get that final result. You know, seeing what a change to employee experience and how that impacts customer experience. But comparing it to SLAs, an SLA is typically measuring a transaction, how well we did on a transaction, or even just a piece of a transaction. You know, if I have a support, you know, common analogy is if I'm looking at a support incident, a ticket, there may be multiple touch points in actually resolving my problem if I contact the support organization. And each one of those touch points might have an SLA. And there might be some SLAs behind the scenes measuring the efficiency, how long a ticket takes to move between organizations, how long it sits within an organization. A lot of it's time measured. And then there's a subjective aspect as well, a CSAT survey typically that kind of comes in. It says, how happy were you with that transaction? And those are really just measuring the people that are suffering, if you think about it. There's a study that says from Vincent Bourne that 35% of people never contact the service desk. Right. And perhaps those of us on the call here are some of those people, right? We just say, well, why? Why don't I contact? Well, they don't help me, or I can do it faster myself. Or maybe you've got a shoulder tap system in the company that you're kind of bypassing the official support and getting help that way. So anyway, those people are not being measured. And there's two groups there, those that are suffering in silence. So those that have a problem don't call in. And then there's other people that don't have a problem, but we never hear from them. Right. And we need to hear about, you know, what was good about their experience. So that's a big difference. One big difference between SLAs and XLAs. SLAs just looking at a transaction, just looking at people suffering that call in typically. And then XLAs looking at the full experience. How do I feel about my overall, all of the kit that IT gives me? You know, when the CIO and the business are making decisions about the device I get, the apps I get, how do I get, you know, single sign-on, how my identity is handled, how do I get data, how do I get services, how do I request things? You know, when I need a replacement or I need an upgrade or I need an app installed or a service, what is that? So looking at that full experience. What it's not typically doing is way over in the HR side of things. You know, we'd be looking at employee experience from, you know, pay, benefits, inclusion, those sorts of things. That's typically not, at least today, baked into an XLA. There are some things that touch on it, we're beginning to touch on it. But so that kind of separates, in my mind, SLAs, XLAs, and then customer experience, and then an HR-related examination of experience. Do you see the same thing, Suresh?
Well, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And just on following on that question about the digital employee experience, do you think that XLA is getting far more importance because of the pandemic, that we are all kind of measuring productivity, a good experience with local IT providing you access and stuff? Is that why XLA has got a lot more importance these days, because we moved on to a pandemic zone of everybody working from home?
Well, it didn't hurt, that's for sure. And I know you've been involved with XLAs before the pandemic. You've been involved with experience management, and we were just starting our journey, you know, before the pandemic started in 2019, really looking hard at it as well then. So, you know, the roots go back further to the pandemic, but I think like the pandemic accelerated a lot of things. And I think it definitely has accelerated the importance of employee experience, especially now that we're thinking about, people working in a hybrid office or remotely, and sometimes here, sometimes in an office. And what is that experience like? What's the difference between the experience of my remote workers or those that are in the office when I have a hybrid meeting? Those things are important as well.
Excellent. So we'll just kickstart us on some of those myths around XLA. So to start with, XLAs are a fad that will disappear after 2 years of failed deployments. Alternatively, because we are talking a lot about the Great Resignation, XLAs will no longer be important because once the recession kicks, there is really no Great Resignation. So what is your thought towards that first myth around XLA?
Well, there will be failed implementations. As with any initiative, the next cool thing that's going to solve all the problems, there will be failures. It could be done badly. We see it being done badly. We see a mistake as to expectations around XLAs. Oh, it's immediately going to drive down my costs. For focusing on cost and not experience and seeing the connection between employee experience and customer experience, that's actually not cost, that's revenue.
Right.
If you're thinking it as a cost center, there is a cost component, but there is some expense in implementing and measuring and doing these things. So I think that first myth, there's some problems I have with that statement. The second one, this idea of today employees are in the driver's seat because of the great resignation, the pandemic, the demand for jobs. There's a feeling that when there's a recession, that the employers are now in the driver's seat. It's like, well, I don't need to care about employee experience anymore. But really, you don't need to. Let's say you have a need for a smaller, in a recession, a smaller employee pool. Don't they need to have a good experience in order
Absolutely.
to provide your customers a great experience?
Absolutely.
During a recession, it's almost even more important to be thinking about employee experience. So I think some people have said that, and I totally disagree with that second myth.
Right. So you have a couple of questions coming from viewers. So first is from Sunita. What is XLA? That's an easier one that I will probably tackle. XLA stands for Experience Level Agreement. And to the point that Weston was talking about, it is experience over a period of time, right? Not just the transactions that we measure as part of customer satisfaction and first call resolutions and things like that. So it's a good starting point of shifting gears from XLA. And there's two components to it. One is the employee experience and how it corresponds to the end customer experience. The next one is a question for you, Weston, from Mithun Prabhu. My question is, if someone didn't involve service desk for any assistance for the incident, because you told that someone doesn't want to call the service desk, then is it not a failure of ITIL processes or practices and implementation or even the organizational culture to use over-shoulder support?
Absolutely, Mithun. Yeah, if that is happening in a company, then it's happening without you measuring it. You don't even, it's like hard to even know what that costs, that shoulder tap sort of support model. What we've seen some companies do effectively is figure out that attitude of shoulder tap and, hey, I'm willing to help and want to help is a great thing to have in culture. Absolutely. But if it means that's that person's job is to provide that support and to be able to track and measure it for operational purposes, it really needs to be tracked as well. Yes.
Yep. Okay, great.
And could I go back to the first question there as well about XLAs?
Sure.
And in the context of there's two different models where XLAs I think come into play. One is where you've got a service provider, that you have a contract with to provide a service like service desk. Okay, an XLA there is going to show up ultimately in the contract. It's written out as to what we're going to measure and what we're going to do to change that measurement over time. And there's even some discussion about, well, should there be a penalty, just like it's sometimes with SLAs, if I don't improve experience, or is there even a bonus if I improve it to a really high level beyond what we would consider to be normal. So there's that framework. And then there's when I don't have a service provider and I'm doing IT internally, it still needs to be written down. right? You write down what this measure is, what the components are of an XLA. XLA would be an experience, and then there'd be, we'll talk about XIs, experience indicators that feed into a single measure to produce a score, and then how that's evaluated and looked at over time. And I will say this as well. Unlike an SLA, which is typically locked in for 3 to 5 years, whatever the contract is, an XLA should be ready. You should be ready to alter it over time. And we'll talk about how that can actually happen in our session today.
Right. And the next question is from a LinkedIn user. What are the parameters to measure XLA then?
Well, I think I've got a little graphic that we can show that with a little bit later, if we can put that one on hold, unless you wanted to give a high level comment on it. Suresh.
Absolutely. That's fine. One more follow-up question on this one. Ben, would there be a difference between CSAT and XLA then? What are measurements really, as we are talking about humans giving scores and not machines? So probably that will also get addressed as part of your slide, I believe.
Yeah, it's definitely a component. And it may not actually be a CSAT specifically in how we use a CSAT like in a service desk. What did you think of that last call? Would you hire that person if you were a service desk company? Those types of things. But what we definitely need to take the human part into account.
Right. I think this is coming into the real meat. So why don't you get us around a little bit about XLA and what do you think has been your journey towards measuring that end user experience with a purpose?
Yeah, and you notice the title here is a bit provocative because we're saying we're going to talk about XLA 2.0. Wait a minute. What about 1.0? Well, let's start with 1.0. What we mean by that. That typically, what a lot of companies do out of the gate to get started is they will look at what I call PC happiness and people happiness. So, Mitun, you asked about the CSAT. There needs to be an evaluation of an employee's sentiment, and not just so. A CSAT is typically something that you invoke at the end of an incident, right? Or a service request. And as I said, that's only the people that are suffering or have a problem. I really need to see my experience of all of my employees. How do you feel about your IT environment as a whole? Is it letting you do your job? Is it holding you back? What's missing? Is it letting you collaborate? You'll have specific questions that you ask your employees. And we can talk a little bit later about some of the mechanics of how you do those surveys. But it's definitely not something you want to just do once a year. And it's not something you want to just do with, at the end of a ticket. Both of those are too limiting. So you definitely need to capture your people happiness, associate a score with that. And a lot of people are looking at a digital experience management tool like Tachyon or NextThink or Lakeside, Eternity. There's different tools out there that will collect and produce a score associated with my PC. How happy is my PC? How's it performing? Has it got blue screens? Has it got crashes? How long is the boot time? All kinds of measures that we can extract from your device. And that's the PC happiness. And that's very easy to get a score for that. And actually to look at a score across different groups and organizations in the company. But we need to incorporate in my XLA how people actually feel. The PC, we may say the PC experience is great, but still people are unhappy. Why? Oh, well, you deployed PCs to everybody, and I want a Mac. So no matter how great that PC is running, I'm still not happy. Right. The only way you're going to know that is to ask, right? So some sort of survey information. So these are generally what we see in, I call this XLA 1.0, the core measures. I'm looking at what's happening with my devices. And I'm looking at how people feel about those devices, and it's across the entire population, everybody, right? What we're saying is there's so much more data that you can use to evaluate experience. So, for example, Unisys, we acquired Unify Square last year. Why? Because they've got a great tool called PowerSuite, which lets us measure UC experience. In other words, what we're doing right now, we're in a streamed webinar type thing. So what is my Zoom experience? What is my Teams experience? Are people collaborating? Are they connecting? Are they using all the components? What is the reliability? What's the video quality? What's the audio quality? These things are really important. And you asked earlier, did the pandemic accelerate? Yeah, it accelerated this aspect of it. And we feel this is an important component, is the UC happiness as well. And then another thing is looking at, once you've established measuring XLAs across your entire organization, we think in XLA 2.0, it's important to start looking at specific experience, measuring experience differently for different personas in your organization, different roles in your organization. So that's not something you do out of the gate. It's something you do, over time, you evaluate that. And another thing to measure is, what is my digital adoption? Meaning, if I'm a business owner, business manager, business leader, and I'm deciding to deploy some sort of digital transformation, like, okay, we're going to consolidate all of our UC tools. We're going to all move to Teams. I'm just using that as an example. What is the adoption of my people in doing that? Or maybe let's say I'm moving from a voice-based support center to chat,
right?
Analog to digital. What is my adoption of that? Who is using it? Did they go from the analog mode to digital? Did they go from voice to chat, try it a few times and quit and go back to using voice?
Sure.
Uh-oh, that was a bad adoption. Something isn't happening. They're not happy. I need to dig into that. So these are additional measures that need to be taken into account. Now, the XLA is essentially a score. It's a number with specific XIs coming into place. Here's examples of several XIs you could pull in. Now, that score is totally useless if you don't do something with it, if you don't act on it. And what we found is, in our journey, is who is it that's going to look at the score, and what are they going to do with it? And we realized we needed a dedicated organization, an experience management organization that has some specific qualities. They're curious. They're like you, Suresh. You just want to dig in and figure out what's going on with this, and why is this? Ask this question: why is this happening? Slice and dice the data. I've got an XLA that says the score is 7.2 for all my employees. Well, what is it for my employees in Europe versus the United States, or versus Brazil? Or maybe slice and dice it not by region, but by role. What's my experience for the sales organization? What's my experience for HR? What's my experience for research and development? Because you'll see different values. And then ask the question, why is it different? And then what do I need to do to change that? And that's where you dig in. Your XLA is the score, but the individual components that feed into that, your XIs, will start to tell you why, or what's going on. It maybe it's your survey that's telling you they're unhappy, or maybe that's fine, and instead it is your ticketing data or select SLAs that are coming into play that are telling you something's wrong. So once you have this, now you can do something with it. Like I said, the score by itself, totally useless. It's just interesting. But if I have this XMO, they can start developing some insights and do something about it. So the first insight is actually to go back and improve the experience of those employees. Let's say I discovered that the sales organization in Texas is unhappy with this Teams migration, as an example. Okay, well, let's figure out why. Are they having bad connectivity? Is it a bad video experience? Is there a bad driver, a bad patch? What is it that's wrong? Is it PC unhappiness? Is it UC unhappiness? Is it people unhappiness? What's the component? Do I need to provide better training? The answer can be very different, right? Depending on what the root problem is. But once I've got this, now I feed that back to my organization, and I proactively solve that problem. I don't have to wait for them to call up and complain. I can see that it's happening and proactively solve it and make them have a better experience. Now, that's great all by itself. I think if your XMO can do that, that's wonderful. But the other thing we're discovering is, because we in the digital workplace are implementing this XLA, as opposed to the cloud folks or the security folks, we are seeing if there's a cloud problem or a security problem or identity problem, or maybe even we're beginning to see an HR problem, right? Right. And so the second insight would be to be able to provide that feedback back to those organizations. So maybe, in the digital workplace, we're seeing that cloud rollout, the SAP upgrade or whatever it was, they think it went fine. We're seeing unhappiness with it, or conflict between that SAP and an Outlook crash or something like that. We're making that connection. We can't fix it, but we shine a light on it and we share that with them. So if you have a CIAM organization in place that's overlooking all of your delivery, this is a great place to feed that to your CIAM organization so that they can take action on it. But
That's a very
again, we're the
important
ones that see it. I'm sorry, what were we going to say, Suresh?
That's a very important point that you mentioned about a service integrator actually managing a lot of suppliers, right? And at one end, they say that we did everything to manage from underpinning contracts and SLAs that we met, but in reality, that the experience is poor. So it probably gets, everybody talks about it from a different perspective. So the collective cumulative experience is very different in how we see this happening around. But that's great. Now, in terms of experience management office, how mature does it take to build an experience management office? Because at one end, we have heard about project management office and program management office and service management office. So what does it take to transition from a service management organization to an experience management organization? And how reality is that going to be getting everybody onboarded to that journey?
I think we made the mistake, Suresh, of trying to just reuse an existing organization to do this, and found a couple of things. One, I said that these people need to be really curious, and that's not always true. Sometimes, the PMO or the SMO, they're very process oriented, step by step. We follow the steps and measure that. That's important. But being able to look at this data and figure out what's going on, asking these questions, so what? And then what now? If you don't get to that what now, there's really no point to this. That what now is the action that you're going to take to resolve this. So that's why we realized we needed to have a dedicated but very small organization that works with these others. It works with the PMO, works with the change management, it works with the service management organization. And if you have CIAM, not all companies have CIAM, but if you have CIAM, definitely working with them as well. And there has to be, and again, I suppose there's a difference if I'm a service provider who provides the XMO as part of the service versus I've got all this in-house. If I'm a service provider, there needs to be an integration, of course, between the customer and the service provider in that XMO, a very strong, communication between them. One other organization, I'm sorry, go ahead, Suresh, sorry.
There's one question, I think this is from Umakant. Now with this XLA and other stuff, have you seen that being incorporated onto the contract? Because think about the earlier contract was more on SLAs, but do you think there is a reality that we can incorporate XLA in a contract really and give the customer the wow experience throughout? Is that being already a reality?
Yeah, I assume you're talking, Umakant, around a service provider, providing a service and then being under contract, a managed service. And I say procurement absolutely expects to see XLAs in the contract. Right. There's been some resistance to putting it in the contract, partly because it's hard to define, partly because, as I said earlier, an XLA should change or be ready to change over time, unlike an SLA, which you can kind of lock in for the 3 to 5 years. Yeah. And once you put it in a contract, it makes it hard to change unless the contract also is defined to say, here's how we change an XLA over time. So I don't have it on this diagram, but in addition to the XMO, we found the need for another very small but important organization called the Experience Governance Board, the XGB. And that group, again, if you're a service provider, you've got a couple people from the client, a couple people from the service provider that are looking at almost like change management for XLAs. Now you might wonder, why would I need to change an XLA? Well, it depends how what your XLA is measuring. Let's say I've got an XLA that's measuring my digital adoption success in moving from voice to chat, as an example. Right. Okay, so I've got that measure in place. Well, once I've achieved a high level of adoption, do I still need to keep measuring it?
No.
Probably not. Right. So they can terminate an XLA, or let's say you are doing a UC migration to Teams, and that was done primarily due to a major merger. Once you've gotten high adoption of Teams, you're thinking, well, maybe I don't need to keep it. But then you think, wait a minute, I've got acquisitions that are continuing to go on, And usually each acquisition brings their own tool, WebEx or whatever, and I want to get them on Teams. I want to do that as well. So I want to probably keep that XLA, but I want to measure, I want to tweak it, excuse me, so that it's measuring the adoption of just that group, as an example.
Perfect. Right. So as you start seeing this whole journey in, what I wanted to kind of shift gears, and I'll probably bring this into perspective. Now, I wanted to kind of touch base on some of those practical experience of implementing XLAs and see what are some of those lessons learned in implementing XLA. But before that, I think I have a couple of questions, if you're okay to sure. So one question is from Mithun, referring back. Weston, I was referring to the service desk incident CSAT, but account level customer feedback on service, especially true for an outsourced service, as nowadays customers are more interested in voice of customer.
Well, then in that case, that's a very, very important measure. Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Looks like we lost connectivity there for a second. Yeah, so the voice of the customer, as I mentioned earlier, it's typically there is an experience, there's a customer experience activity going on. And then now you got the CIO, and it's done by one group of people. And then you got the CIO now doing this employee experience. Should they be separate? Should they be connected? And you are hinting at, I think, the importance of connecting the two of those. So that voice of the customer, how does the customer feel about the overall service that we're providing? And I'm not quite sure. I think you're talking about like a managed services customer, but I would say let's even go beyond that to say that managed services customer's customer. So let's say, let's just make up an example. Let's say I've got a healthcare provider and they hire out a managed service provider to do service desk and field services and endpoint management. And then they've got employee experience built in. So we could be looking at the survey associated with, the customer, the hospital itself, but we could also be looking at the hospital's patient experience program, or CX. That's CX there, and finding out how we connect them together. That is really exciting. There's not an automated way of doing that, but once we start doing that, man, I tell you, really exciting things can start happening.
Excellent. There's a comment from Roman. XLA change is evolution. It should be an ongoing management obligation to continuously manage the experience. Isn't that spot on?
Roman, I think when I started looking at XLAs, I didn't understand that, what you're saying. I was in the mindset of, well, we set up an SLA for 3 to 5 years. When we do an XLA, we'll set it up 3 to 5 years. And it didn't occur to me that it would change. But as we started deploying it with customers, we recognized over time, some XLAs will continue forever. But most of them, the XIs may change that feed in. The XLA may not be needed at all going forward, and I may need to create new XLAs that are measuring something new that's going on with the business. Fully agree with you.
Yep. There's another question that comes in from Sunita. How do you find out which touch point is not creating good experience? Because its overall experience are not particular to any specific team.
Yeah, and that's the danger, Sunita, of just focusing on the score. So if I've got a digital experience score that says, ta-da, you're at 7.6, and last month you were at 7.4, it must be good, right? Or we're down to 6.9, ooh, that's bad. If, like I said earlier, if you don't ask these two questions, so what, and then what now, then just having that score is useless. It doesn't do anything by itself. So we haven't really gone in great depth in looking at what might go into an XLA, other than saying there's a component of PC happiness, people happiness, maybe UC happiness, other measures of what's going on. So, you could even look at your security team. What's the level of malware attacks or downtime due to malware attacks? That could be fed in as well and measure that. But these XIs, the individual measures that go into it, that's when you start to understand why my score has dropped or gone up. The score itself just says the changes happen, but when you look into the low-level XIs, you may I'll just give an example here. Let's say that experience has been going up and up and up and up, and then all of a sudden it drops down. Okay, well, if we unpack those XLAs that are measuring what's going on, we may see that how the biggest component to why the score went down is coming from the people happiness. People are saying they're unhappy with their knowledge, the self-help system.
Sure.
You go, well, oh, did something change with my self-help system? This is the kind of process you would go through in the XMO. Did my self-help system change? Oh, no, nothing changed there. Well, what's wrong here? What specifically are they complaining about? They're saying that the Outlook help is terrible.
Right.
Wow, we didn't change anything with our Outlook help. Oh, but we did change our version of Outlook here. We upgraded an entire platform of Outlook. Oh, we forgot to update our knowledge articles. So when people load up and have a problem with Outlook, version, 10, I'm just making up numbers, the data we've got is for Outlook version 9 or 8.
Sure.
It's out of date.
Yeah.
That's the root cause of the problem. Well, now I know the solution. Update my knowledge articles, and better yet, I need to look at my process here for change management. Why did that not happen? Why did I not update those articles when I did my planned upgrade? So it's just an example of how you would unpack it to get to an answer. I mean, the XIs can be all over the place. That's just an example. Hopefully that helps.
Right. So for viewers, just to give a bit of background, XI stands for experience level indicators. So anything that you think from a sentiment perspective, it's going to be very important for your digital employee experience. It makes part. So now coming to the implementation part of it, what are some of your lessons learned and kind of putting that into stream if you want to kind of run through us? Some of the lessons learned in that experience of implementing XLA, because I don't think this is going to be easy task. How long did it take for you to implement XLA in your organization and probably create awareness and the capability to make something of this sort of reality? So give us a little bit of a rundown memory lane of how much time and effort did it take to make this a reality?
Yeah, and just because it took this amount of time for us doesn't mean that would be for everybody, because there's a lot of great tools available now. I mean, we started in 2019. We recognized we needed to understand this better. We worked with obviously, the analysts and the research firms that are out there, what they're doing, the studies that they were performing. We did some joint work with ISG and an ebook on experience. But we also realized we needed to get some training. So we went to XLA Collab, and we went through several of the training sessions there to ask the same questions you're asking her. What is an XLA? Well, how do I get value out of an XLA? Do I need an organizational change? All of those things became clear. So that was in 2019. The pandemic then hit, and we realized, wow, that we really, really need to move forward with this. And the creation of an XMO, I think I hinted at one of the lessons learned we had was thinking that we could just run this out of service desk. We've got a tracking and CSAT and stuff like that. No, they're really focused on transactions, and they're not seeing everybody. Only communicating with those that have problems. So we realized we needed to have a separate organization, and we needed to be able to have a view into digital experience on how happy is the PC, collecting objective data as well. Another lesson learned was around the surveys. We thought, oh, it's just a simple matter. We do CSATs all the time. When I'm talking about CSATs, I'm talking about the question we ask at the end of a ticket. So we know how to do surveys. No, there's so much science that goes into proper surveys. Like, I mentioned earlier, don't just survey once a year. It's better to try to survey once a month. But do I want to be surveyed 12 times a year?
Right.
No. So that means I need to select the percentage of my population, a 12th, each month, so that I have this moving real-time evaluation of what's going on. Well, which 12? Whom am I going to ask the questions of? How many questions will I ask? We talked with some companies that are really good at doing surveys. Happy Signals in Finland, they've got a very interesting approach. Medallia, Qualtrics, on the HR side of things, and we realized that you can have a lot of questions, but you only ask a few. And what my second question is that I asked depends on what I answered for the first.
Sure.
There's that level of science that goes into surveying as well. So that people happiness is really important, and it's probably something that continues to evolve. I mean, Roman, you mentioned the need to evolve with XLA. I think there's a real need to evolve your survey process throughout the life cycle as well. So those are some.
And that's great. One of the things that I get to ask, let's talk a little bit about the customer experience. We talk a lot about the digital experience, how the systems are being worked upon, how quickly we're doing, how was the scores looking at it, then go into much more specific on the insights part of it. But how do you really get into the customer experience part of it? These are two parallel aspects of it, because at one end, I think we too much focused on employee digital experience, but how does it going to translate to customer experience, and how do you make that gradual transition that we eat our own dog food, make sure that whatever we deal with our own experience within our employees can also be catered to a larger part of the customer experience? So how has been that transition evolved within your own organization?
Yeah, and maybe go back to the graphic, the animation, and I mentioned there was 3 insights that we could take. One being the insight to fix people's problems, the other shine a light on other organizations. But the third, the last insight is actually connecting with other business initiatives and providing feedback to them. One of them is actually HR. So the HR organization probably, well, hopefully, is doing a really good job doing surveys. Except oftentimes it's maybe just annually or once a quarter, so that they can get out of sync. Like, for example, if they were to do a survey, January of 2020, and then they're trying to figure out what is my employee sentiment in April of 2020, that survey's garbage, really, right? The pandemic hit, major event happened, but I'm not going to do a survey again for another 12 months, or even half a year or something. So that is a flaw, I think, of what I see in a lot of HR type surveys. So if we're doing XLAs properly and collecting people sentiment like on a monthly basis, we're in the CIO is getting an insight into how people feel that is real time. And maybe it's an early adopter that people are so unhappy they're going to leave. Who's going to leave? Which part of the organization? Is it sales? Is it my research team? Is it someone in HR? Who is it that's unhappy? And why are they unhappy? Maybe it's something I can fix as a CIO, or maybe it's not. Maybe this is indicating an underlying problem that really only HR can fix. It's a benefits thing, it's a inclusion thing, or it's a policy thing. So that's, the business unit leader at the CHRO, we're thinking that's a great example of how you need to connect the experience measurement of employees that we're doing in the CIO level over with what the CHRO is doing. And actually, we should look for a reverse flow of information as well.
Sure.
The CHRO is looking at employees that are leaving the company, and they typically have an exit interview, and they find out why. Well, some of those, or they may be having a hard time attracting talent, and they find out why. Well, maybe it's because the company doesn't have a great hybrid work policy. Yeah. We're kind of seeing that in the news, right? Well, that's information that the CHRO should be providing the CIO. We need to provide the technology and the processes that allow for hybrid work. So HR can't fix it, CIO can. HR has the information in that case, and the other way around, the CIO. Now, you asked specifically around CX, customer experience. In other words, the client's customers. It's the same thing. Today, it's really around conversations between these silos. The CIO, right. The CHRO, or the CRO, the revenue officer that's typically looking at CX. I'm not seeing today actual integrated out-of-the-box data feeds between the two. Yeah. But I think that maybe that's XLA 3.0.
So you got to create a new version of XLA 3.0. So shifting gears in terms of enablement, right? A lot of times companies are looking at, okay, we want to start this XLA journey. Weston Morris has triggered us a great conversation because of this LinkedIn Live. Let's go on. So where do someone get started off in the XLA journey? Do you think that there is a kind of an enablement program that you kind of would start thinking about? And I can kind of talk a little bit about that. But what is your thing? Is there a kind of a method to madness from where you start from, and how do you build that capability to move forward? Yeah.
Well, I mentioned earlier, I alluded to the fact that we at Unisys recognize the need to really have a better understanding about XLAs, to get some actual training. And you think it's so new, can you even find training? But we did, with it was called Citrus Collab at the time, now XLA Collab. I'm sharing the podcasts here that I've done, the Digital Workplace Deep Dive, where I've captured a lot of that. I don't want to say you can go here instead of taking the courses, but you can get a taste for what's going on. For example, Alan Nance, the CEO of Citrus Collab, I've interviewed him in talking about. I did 3 podcasts with him at the beginning of 2021 on specifically around experience and experience management. Here, like, is bad tech experience causing your employees to quit? 2 amazing things happen when you measure experience. Can the digital workplace give you what you want and what you need? How much more money does my company make when I'm happy? Interviews with people such as Alan, Neil Keating as well, as to what is happening in the XLA space and get a better understanding. But we went through the training. It was super valuable to get that foundational training. There's the XLA Foundation, XLA Master, and then that aha moment of, oh, just having the score isn't going to get this what I need to get to value. I need this XMO organization in place.
Right.
There was training on that as to, well, what are the qualities of the people? What does the data flow look like? How do they unpack an XLA? To the question was asked earlier, to find out, what is the underlying problem and how do I fix it? So that was an early part of our journey. The second was, leadership that fully understands the value of experience management. I mean, Leon Gilbert, who leads all of the digital workplace for Unisys, says, hey, we're moving from end user services to end user experience, that X being, an actual focus, and then investing in it as well.
So can you please put the URL on the chat? Yeah, we will put the resource from podcast of Weston Morris into the chat slowly. So I want to kind of quickly go into the section of enablement quickly here. One of the things that we bring as part of the enablement from TaUB Solutions is focusing on what we call as the essence of experience, then go towards an experience foundation and what has changed now, what experience is all about, then how to move forward with that experience. And then you talked a little bit about how to create your XLAs, what are the parameters or touch points that you want to kind of look through it, and how do you put them into real operations, right? Mastering the XMO or Experience Management Office. So we put the Essence of Experience course to be a 4-hour workshop where if you are a service management professional, some of the practices, that's good, because I'm seeing a lot of people making the shift from SLA to XLA. So if you know a little bit about the service management and with ITIL 4 and other stuff, that's a great conversation to see where do you start from where you are, the guiding principles to see how you step your game moving forward. The XLA Foundation Course is a 2.5 days of course where the essence of experience is recommended but not required. And you get a certified badge called the XLA Ambassador, which is really a solid course to see how we can work through this whole element. The second one is the Mastering the XLA course. It could be an 8-hour course where we find yourselves to Weston talked about a lot of the surveys, how it needs to be done, what are the parameters that we need to think, how you need to articulate the parameters and teams and audience. There's a lot of planning. What I loved about it, Weston, when we do this workshop, there's a lot more deep dive understanding with different perspectives of what is the best or better way to make it happen. There's no one size fits all approach, but having that conversation strategically to look at what does it matter the most for me. And in the case in SRE, we talk about the SLOs, the service level objectives. So similarly, we look at the existing journey map and find out what is going to be appropriate, if it's going to be a digital employee experience or it's going to be someone else to run through it. And then you master to become an XMO. I think that's the crux, right? I mean, you're getting the people from where they are and then start building them through the ecosystem of making it much more valid to make through this work. The last one is on consulting, right? And you talked a little bit, Weston, about how much is you got the XLA knowledge, you got yourself enabled. Now what, right? So how do you bring in that level of helping your end clients, right, the end user experience, to create more XLAs, XMOs, like scanning, right? Xscan, where we kind of look at how's your landscape look like, and look at some of those models that we can leverage specifically to make your customer experience a much more enriching one. So if you need any questions on the resource from a XLA perspective, we at TaUB Solutions are a strategic partner of XLA Collab, where we are, you can look at taubsolutions.com, XLA Consulting, or taubsolutions.com -XLA Academy, or send a mail to info@TaUB Solutions. So that's what I had for this, and let's see where we have as part of questions before we kind of pick it up. So we have 10 minutes left over. So if you have any questions for Weston as we go through this, please put it on the chat window and we'll take it over. To start with, Weston, where is the next wave of XLA taking us? And you did talk a little bit about 3.0. How does 3.0 look like? And where do you think organizations to start to embark on the 3.0 journey of XLA?
Yeah, I this ties in with Lisa's comment here about XLAs and Roman's question about the evolution of XLAs. We should call them flex LAs. Okay, love that, Lisa.
And she says we like to think of drinking our own champagne. So
yeah,
that's a part of doing it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But what we're seeing is, so the XLAs seem to be evolving in two ways. One is, what you ask the question, what additional data am I sitting on, or do I have access to, that I'm not yet including in here? Right. So we talked a little bit about the the surveys, and Mithun, you mentioned the different types of surveys that are possible. A great way to find out, for example, at Unisys, a great way to find out how people feel about what's going on with the latest change in the digital workplace at Unisys is to look at the Yammer channel.
Right.
Because people are posting there and sharing information, sharing knowledge. So tapping into social feeds is something we're not really seeing done programmatically, and the question is, perhaps should be in a future XLA. There's a lot of pros and cons as to doing that, but asking that question, what additional data, what additional sources? Maybe it's on the security side. I go into the security folks. Maybe there's something in the cloud. Maybe there's at the future, maybe there's an industry feed or some benchmarking that I can tap into. So that's one aspect.
Right. That's a great one. And in terms of, isn't that sometimes overwhelming to get all of those stuff in place? What do you think should be a good area for people to look out for resources if they want to know more about XLA? Organizations have gone through implementing XLA. Where should they go out for resources? Where do you think they will get some of the conversations to have, and even talk with you if they want to know whether they're doing it in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, we're both active on LinkedIn, and you can reach out to us there. But XLA TV is a great place to, it's a consortium of different companies. We're involved with it. You are as well, where we as we talk with customers that are willing to share their story, we can put that out there. Or if we're talking to a vendor that contributes to some aspect of experience management, it doesn't have to be purely into an XLA, but employee experience or even customer experience. That's a great place to look. There's one channel on there called XLA ampersand or XLA plus, meaning what is my connection between experience management and my other initiatives that I've got going on. So expect to see more stories out there. There's one we're working on, XLA plus OCM.
Right.
And how do they fit together? XLA plus HR, XLA plus SIAM, XLA plus CX. I think there's already one out there on that one, XLA plus CX. So that is the other, you asked the question about evolution of XLAs. That's the other aspect of it is how not only the data coming in, I got additional data points that I can use as XIs, but what how does what I'm measuring from employee experience connect with other things that are going on in the company or even outside of the company?
Well, that's a very important point that you talked about, touching every initiative towards a holistic experience. So connecting the dots and making sure that everybody sees a storyline. Isn't that it's much of creating a storyline where everything's moving together makes total sense? If we make that whole jigsaw puzzle to find out everything in that value chain is actually having some feeds, whether you call it as upstream, downstream, interfaces, dependencies, how can you get value out of this whole thing? So it's been an absolute honor, Weston, to have you in our conversation today. So what are your final thoughts for XLA and experience management? Is it that going to stay forever? Is it going to be something that is going to change dramatically as we go into this hybrid workplace? What next? What's the roadmap look like? Is it more shiny, glossy as we go into our 22, 23 and years from now?
I don't think experience management, employee experience management, is going away. It becomes even more important. I think, to Roman's comment earlier, the actual XLAs need to change, need to evolve. You need to be ready for that. Can't lock them in and say, this is what I do for 5 years. But will continue to grow in importance, especially as we connect them with other initiatives that are going on in the company. If I can really see that connection between EX and CX, if I can look at specific personas in my organization, key drivers of value in the company, and tailoring an experience for them, that's another great value proposition as well.
Well, Lisa says, my final thought is that I want to be Weston Morris when I grow up. And that's a feeling towards doing that.
You're too kind, Lisa. Thank you.
Right. So it's a great time, everyone. And I think we had some great time together. I hope you found the session useful. We will put some backlinks on the resources like XLA TV, the podcast that he was talking about, some resources. So stay tuned for this one. We really want to thank every one of you. I hope you enjoyed these sessions. Put on your comments, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. So before you sign off, I want to place a comment here that our next LinkedIn Live event will be on the 21st, just exactly 1 week from now, and we're going to talk about upskilling. So if you are keen to know about your career progressions and the Great Resignation, stay tuned. We are going to have Dheeraj Nayal, the community leader for DevOps Institute, joining us on next Tuesday. So stay tuned for our next live event at 9 o'clock India time. And I hope you will continue to have this conversation beyond this LinkedIn Live. And we hope to see you in person in attending some of these conferences, right? Thank you so much. And Donna says, thank you. Guys, be well. We had Roman. Thank you, inspiring as always. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. And we hope you have a great day and the rest of the week, and stay safe. Thank you so much, and see how we can do that. Do you have the link for our next EOE? Yes, I think we will do that, Lisa. Thanks for pointing it out, and we will put that on the chat window after we come back live. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of the evening. Thank you very much. Thanks, Weston, for making it.
Thank you, Suresh. Appreciate all the questions.
Bye.